I'm joined then on the line as well by ANC Deputy Secretary General, that's Jessie Duarte. Ms. Duarte, this is a plan that clearly has been very immense in terms of strategy. It has had a whole host of people in terms of discussion. Is the ANC happy with it?
Extremely happy. We're happy with the fact that one of the key pillars behind some of the discussions we had with the President and Cabinet in consultation with the Alliance was that we leave no one behind. And this package certainly doesn't leave anyone behind. It takes care of what we believe are the most important things, is to look at the public health plan, social relief and fighting hunger. We spent a great deal of time on that particular matter, and I think in particular we're very happy with the fact that the Cabinet has also agreed to include unemployed people, even though it's for a short term. It is some relief. Over and above that is the long-term issues, the phasing in of opening up the economy. We're very happy about that.
Yeah.
Secondly, the infrastructure bill that the President talks about, we believe that will help a great deal as we go forward. And in addition to that, we understand and we believe that we support the taking loans from low-interest loans from the IMF and other international institutions, as well as money that we could find within our own resources here in South Africa.
So let me get
it
that.
Covers everything, I believe. Yeah.
So let me get this straight then, Ms. Duarte. Are you happy then that we are indeed in discussions then with the likes of the IMF, the World Bank, all of those to try and get as much funding as possible to help South Africa in this economic crisis? What
we have said is this crisis is like no other crisis humankind has experienced for 100 years. The last time something as big as this happened was 100 years ago with the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
And hundreds of thousands of people died. We anticipate that we're still seeing the crisis facing us. We haven't yet faced all of it. And we need to throw everything at it. And we had deep discussions about what it would mean to go to the World Bank and the IMF. And we understand and believe that they have put out packages which are low interest bearing and where they haven't got the usual old conditionalities that we know of in the past. And we're comfortable that the Cabinet and the leadership in the Cabinet will make sure that our sovereignty will not be undermined, and we trust them, and we know that they will do everything possible to negotiate the best possible deals in our national interest, and that gives us comfort.
Yeah. ANC Deputy Secretary General there, Jessie Duarte, thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's continue that discussion now with DA Interim Leader John Steenhuisen, who does also join me on the line. Your reactions to that address then by the President, does that cover enough of South Africa's economy, Mr. Steenhuisen?
Well, I certainly think it was a very positive speech this evening, that the President covered a lot of the ground that we wanted him to do so. We're very glad that we're moving towards a smart lockdown as we proposed, and the document that's been released this evening shows a phased approach using very similar colors to the ones we used. So I think that's a positive sign. I think it's also positive that we are approaching international lending agencies like the International Monetary Fund and exploring those options rather than looking to dip into local pension funds. So I think that's all very, very positive. Certainly a blow for the Ace Magashule faction and others within the ANC. Clearly a sign that Mr. Mboweni and Mr. Ramaphosa's factions are winning out in this particular argument. So I think those are all very, very positive. But we're having a press conference tomorrow at midday to unpack it in greater detail. But first blush, looks like the President was on the money. It's all the right areas, and I think that it's a solid footing to go forward.
I must say that that does give some sense of comfort. Are you, in terms of belief, are you okay with the 100 billion rand that has been set aside then for the protection of jobs as well as the creation of them as well?
Well, you would know that 10 days ago, the Democratic Alliance started to get South Africa to start thinking around lives and livelihoods. We're very glad that that terminology has also been adopted now by the announcement this evening because, we've got a twin threat to life in South Africa, and that is the spread of the virus and an economic grinding depression. We've already seen how hunger is beating down the doors of many, many South African homes as we speak, and that hard lockdown is not sustainable going forward. And we have to start thinking about lives and livelihoods, and I think the President's pivot onto that this evening is to be welcomed, absolutely. So I think the President's done the right thing this evening, very supportive of the actions. But of course, we want to unpack the detail a little bit more.
Sure.
Start to tease out some of the finer details, but certainly on first blush, the President's ticked all the boxes.
John Steenhuisen, interim DA leader, thank you so much for your time as well this evening, unpacking just a little bit more when it comes to the President's speech. Let's talk about businesses' reaction to this. Now, the President of Business Unity South Africa, BUSA, Sipho Pitjana, he joins me on the line. Mr. Pitjana, the reaction then from you perhaps to this this speech then by the President, 200 billion rand loan guarantee scheme to be developed in partnership with major local banks, Treasury and the Reserve Bank. Is that sufficient?
Aramila, good evening to you and your viewers. In these circumstances, I don't know what sufficient means, but I must start by saying that as business, we welcome the President's stimulus package that's looking at putting a defensive position and stimulating position for the economy, but also importantly, showing a caring government that intervenes to mitigate the humanitarian impact on ordinary citizens in the country, particularly the most vulnerable. And we think that it does reflect that the conversations that we've been having in NEDLAC and in other fora with government are paying off, and we are keen to make sure that we work together to get over this.
What is the key message that you're sort of giving your partners as well in this in a scenario like this? What is it that you're saying to them in order to be part of the solution? Things need to be done. What is it exactly that you're hoping that the business community gets involved in doing over this time?
Well, we have to give as much as we take. This is an environment where we make sure that the bigger, stronger players in the economy are keen to make sure that we lift the most vulnerable. This is the informal sector. This is small business. That's why you've seen the banking associations who are members and the insurance industry who are members have come together to make sure that we take a different view with regard to those that may default on their loans, whether it's ordinary customers or it's businesses that are facing difficulties in this period. That's why property companies are taking a particular view with regard to their tenants to make sure that they are not pushed out to the streets and that we are rigid in the way we deal with them. So there's a whole conversation that is taking place with regard to various actors in the economy to make sure that we mitigate this. We try to urge as much as possible those that don't need to claim from the UIF and can afford to pay their employees to please do so that those that are a lot more vulnerable claim in terms of the temporary employment relief scheme that government is looking at, so that we don't put too much pressure on that scheme and we allow those that are really needy and vulnerable to take advantage of those provisions.
Yeah.
So this is not an occasion for people to try and get a quick buck and dead off. We need to work together to make sure that we survive this. These are very challenging times. We don't know how long this situation is going to be with us. If we work against each other, we are going to have a disaster in our hands. We just have to hold our hands together.
Mr. Pitjana, very, very quickly, in just 30 seconds, it's a phased approach in terms of unlocking South Africa in terms of this lockdown. Your sense of how you'd like it done in order for business to get the most and to continue to offer as much as possible to the economy?
We've shared with government detailed analysis of what's happening in the various sectors and what the impact would be of an extended lockdown in the various sectors, and that should give a clear indication of where possible lifting of lockdown in various sectors, various areas of the economy would be, and also at the same time as we give due regard to health protocols that have to be in place to make sure that we don't lose the gains that we have made, because we don't think that this is about economy versus health.
Sure.
We have to look at both of these in tandem. We can't just focus on health, because if we do, we might have a lockdown that has disastrous consequences.
Yeah.
And people will die from poverty and a failing economy.
All right.
So we need to make sure that we have a balanced approach.
Mr. Pichana, I appreciate your time. The president there of Business Unity South Africa, Sipho Pichana, joining us there as well. We continue then as well with more reaction to this. The leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Dr. Peter Groenewald, joining us on the line. Mr. Groenewald, the FF Plus's reaction to this, does it offer you enough? You get the sense as well that the parcels that are going to be offered out as well at a time like this, with social development, solidarity and other NGOs, 250,000 food parcels. That seems like a fair amount. Do you concur?
In a certain sense, yes, I do concur. And we do say that it is the correct approach from the president. The 4 phases, he's put it forward. But then we also say that we would have a different approach when it comes to the most vulnerable in South Africa. The Freedom Front Plus say that we must remember that there are many people who were not vulnerable before the lockdown, but who are also now part of the vulnerable people in South Africa. Furthermore, we also say that we would have a more different approach when it comes to the businesses. Yes, the president, and I think we applaud that, for instance, that there's going to be, for instance, 100 billion to protect jobs and save jobs, although the president didn't say how they're going to do it. The same with the 200 billion loan guarantee scheme with the bank's treasury and the Reserve Bank. We don't have the detail. The Freedom Front Plus would have liked to see that there should have been relief in taxes. We could have lower, for instance, company tax, personal income tax, property tax.
But you are finding, Mr. Groenewald, that the president did offer some sort of solution there by saying that even things like tax deferrals, you're allowed to extend those just a little bit more. If you then give money to the Solidarity Fund, you get a 10% tax relief. So there are sort of measures in doing that. Does that not perhaps make you happy in the sense that he did offer some sort of solution to that one?
Not completely, because that is only for some people. But if, for instance, if you've lowered a personal tax, it reaches each and every person who's paying tax. Yes, I understand the referral situation of 35%, but in the end, they also have to pay. That we must also remember. So therefore, we say that if they have lowered the taxes, because now, if we, for instance, look at the loan guarantee scheme, say, for instance, it's a soft loan with very low interest, then you still have to pay back. And therefore, the Freedom Front Plus say that, unfortunately, at this moment, if we look at the debt of government, and we know, and he said that there's going to be a reprioritizing on the budget, we will have to see how that is going to do. So, in general, we are satisfied.
Sure.
It steps in the right direction. Of course, we wait for what's going to happen and what the announcements are going to be on Thursday. We agree that it must be a risk analysis of different companies and businesses to see how they can open up. So in general, we agree.
It's going to...
we would have had some other proposals.
Yeah, look, it's certainly going to be very difficult. It's a juggling act that I don't think anybody would get 100% right, but we certainly hope for the most part it does the job then. Let's chat then to political analyst Daniel Silk, of course, Dr. Peter Groenewald from the Freedom Front Plus. Thank you so much for your time. Daniel, it's a measure that you look at and just think, wow, we've been able to put together 500 billion rand. Is it well thought out? Does it cover all the bases for you?
Hello, Ravi. Yeah, look, I think, the figure is big. 10% of GDP, that's fairly impressive, even by global standards. But I think it's easy to get carried away by the big figures that have been bandied about. The key issue to me will be on the basis of the disbursement of these funds, the targeted disbursement. We know that the key individuals here are the poor, destitute, and hungry. And I think when you're looking at a 5-week lockdown, you're on the cusp, in a sense, of social dislocation or social unrest. So you need to quickly get these funds to people. And the question is, does government have the systems in place in order to do that effectively? That's my first issue. And the second issue is more from a sort of broadly economic point of view. I mean, the question really remains also, where are we actually going to get this 500 billion from? We've been told in the president's speech that it's going to come from a variety of different sources, some of it from lending agencies, even like the IMF and the World Bank. But I think, too, it's going to raise our debt to GDP levels. It could even put pressure on tax tables in South Africa for the next few years, certainly amongst the wealthier within the country. So I think there's some unanswered questions regarding the sourcing of the funds. But the urgency of the matter, I think, is certainly there. And the disbursement to me, in a transparent and efficient fashion is going to be the test of this package.
Mr. Silk, what about SOEs then? I mean, do you feel like they got any sort of recognition at a time like this? Because they certainly are going to need to be the biggest movers, right? They need to find their way from here, and they unfortunately won't get any help from government any longer.
Well, look, the president spoke about a reprioritization of spending. He also spoke about the broader issue of structural reforms, and I'm pleased to see that he did put that into his speech, because you can't just disperse huge amounts of money and expect it not to have an effect on the broader economy. And the only way to make up these big expenditure items here is, in fact, to change the way you do business, is to change policy, and for that matter, to change your relationship with the SOEs. So I think we've seen the president hint at that in terms of the structural adjustments that need to be made. And let's see the detail of that as we move from the brushstroke issues that we've seen to the real policy challenges that were there before COVID-19, and they're still there now tonight.
Daniel Silk, appreciate the time. Thank you so much for that outlook as well then, in seeing where exactly we go to from here. The devil is in the detail. Hopefully we will get more from the president, that's President Cyril Ramaphosa as well on Thursday, and hopefully even then from Finance Minister Tito Mboweni, who hasn't really been too forthcoming when it comes to detail as well, and that is absolutely critical. South Africa, it is going to be a struggle, but one that the president has clearly said he wants to be a part of. We will find the solution. It will take time, but certainly we're going to have to